Good morning, and thank you for joining us once again for the Signal Innovation Showcase. Our next speaker is Frank Berguglio, so please welcome Frank to the podium.
Thank you, George. Well, we hope we're starting this at the right time, but I believe we are. Today we're going to talk about the hidden threat of machine identities, non-human identities, and how that applies in a zero trust world, and why is this important? The risks associated with unmanaged identity is key, not only across our cybersecurity ecosystem, but also to the audit process. And lately, within the Department of Defense, there's twofold going on. There's solving the fire audit challenges. There's building a zero trust model, and there's ICAM modernization, and then we're going to pull all this to the tactical edge. So we're not trying to do too many things at once, right? But modern cybersecurity has kind of evolved into a foundation in identities. And we were just talking a little bit, the provenance of attributes and understanding where identities come from is key. And a lot of that stems from the hidden identities. And those are usually the contractors, the mission partners that we bring in, or like I said, the RPAs, the bots, the service accounts that are, I'm not going to get on the AI bandwagon yet. That'll come sooner or later. But, really, as we get towards agentic AI, and I heard a Marine colonel a couple weeks ago state, they are already have agents building agents that build agents. And if you think about what that does to an AWS workload, and what that does to the entitlements and what those agents that build agents that can build agents, how do you manage that, right? So we need this visibility, compliance, and control. And that's really, kind of stole my thunder on this one, so I'll pass by it. But we can't protect what we can't see. So how do we find these things? We would hope that we have structured processes like an access request or a SAR, and we have that on the human side, but we don't necessarily have that on the agent side. So we're going to compare and contrast some of these things, but as we move through this, the challenge is the same. And it all goes back to those three words I use a lot, and I will repeat them: visibility, compliance, and control. And you go, Frank, we're security people. We don't want to talk about compliance. Sorry. It is reality for us, right? We're always going to be asked who has access, how'd they get it, should they have it, are they suitable? And all that stems back to what really drives all of us, and that's either a DSKID instruction or 853. Guess what? We get audited on those things. We need to answer those questions. We can't govern what we can't see either. And visibility is the foundation of security. And that really is kind of going towards that zero trust model, right? Where, we need to continuously ask questions. We need to see what we're trying to protect, and we need to protect what we see. So without this visibility of these machine identities or of these third-party identities, how are we able to enforce policy, assess risk, respond to threats? And that's kind of the other thing that as we modernize, identity used to stop at the provisioning process. Well, identity security is modernized, right? It's a closed loop now. It's from where the identity exists in the beginning, right? How it gets instantiated within the environment, and I don't care what kind of identity, but it goes all the way through that closed loop process to when that identity leaves the organization. It's no longer suitable, it's no longer accessible, we don't need it, whatever that reason is. But also, what if it did something wrong? And Josh and I, sitting here typing on his phone, used to have a lot of conversations, in Brendan, from the PAM community about what if someone does something in a session that they shouldn't. Well, we close that loop with identity lifecycle. The privileged account management system, the SIM, sends whatever platform that alert gets logged into, sends the governance platform a signal, and that's how we remove that risky person. Whether it's an elevation of a risk score, or whether it's, hey, Josh did something he shouldn't have, let's get rid of him now. Or it might be, let's put him through the governance process again and go reevaluate his SAR, his electronic SAR. So all that can be accomplished. And without this, without that process, without those closed loops for governance and control, it leaves us exposed to, really avoidable risk. This is just modernizing our identity security ecosystem. I want to make sure I'm not going too far over. So, when we look at the excessive access, and this is kind of evident in some of the FIRE findings of orphaned accounts, of overprivileged accounts, excessive access is really a silent but critical weakness. Especially when it persists beyond what's necessary or visible. So going back to that visibility, going back to the overprivileged user. Overprivileged, it becomes a recurring thing, and we're going to talk about a couple breaches. Hope I don't step on anyone's toes here, but it's reality, right? It's in the news, it's happening live. I guarantee one of the breaches we'll talk about probably affected a lot of people sitting in this room. So, I guess the key, and as we, think of the machine, and we think of that non-human, but also that third party that we bring in from one of our mission partners, we have to put them through the same rigor that we do an employee. Right? That's very easy when we, found everything on a CAT card. We know who you are. Even with contractors, we have a somewhat of a good, hold on them. But how many people have been a contractor with a CAT card, left the organization you were in with that CAT card, and you didn't turn it in? I'm guilty. I will admit it. I actually have a drawer with a few in it, because they were never collected. So how long did I sit with an Active Directory account with a valid credential? Now, granted, I had possession of it, but that account remained active until someone, maybe my certificate expired, or someone actually went, yeah, Frank hasn't been here in a while. We can go ahead and get rid of him. And that's, something, it goes into closing that loop again. So when we compare and contrast, the risks associated, they're very similar. And, we need that onboarding, offboarding process, whether it's, like I said, whether it's a third party or a non-human ownership. Who owns me as a contractor, right? It's a COTAR. How often have you been a contractor and you've met with your COTAR? Not very often, right? I mean, I was a lowly consultant churning and burning 8 to 12 hours a day on a project. I didn't know who the COTAR was. Someone within my organization did, but I didn't. They didn't know me. They didn't know if I was on that day or not. So we need to have these automated processes. Access privileges, again, they both have the same challenges. We're automating the SAR and the DoD now. That's a great thing. But what about those RPAs, bots, and service accounts that don't have a SAR? They do get created, but like I said, they can disappear. They could get stood up by another process. Life cycle management, visibility, all key. And again, I'm going to say compliance, right? All of our systems have ATOs. All of our applications get audited for one reason or another. But this shouldn't be an audit problem. it should be handled well before it becomes an audit. So let's talk about the real world breaches before we get into kind of, the SailPoint solution to this. SolarWinds, affected many of us here through OPM. I do remember working for a PAM vendor at the time and going back into OPM and doing a demonstration and testing to say, okay, let's start vaulting our contractor accounts. But what that taught us and what that started was really the highlight of PAM within the federal government. And we had to take that step. It resulted in the Cybercom task order within the Department of Defense for PAM. It actually was the foundation and the kick in the butt to do CDM and have privilege be part of the master user record phase 2. The other one that is a good example of both instances is actually Okta, an identity vendor, where an identity vendor was compromised. It was a third-party credential. It was, on both sides of the fence, it was keys that should have been vaulted. So when we have these things, and these examples that do affect us on a daily basis within the department, we have to take them serious. And we have to prevent them from happening again. So third party and machine are not uncommon to hear in the department. There's a huge effort for supply chain management that's being driven by CISA, it's being driven by the DoD, I think CMMC as well. All that's talking about the third party. On the machine side, they apply as well. So how do we approach this situation? We're extending the identity security ecosystem, and non-human, if you haven't seen, is almost as big of a buzz as AI in the identity community right now. So SailPoint's been going down this path for actually quite a few years, and we've been able to do this natively in our platform for many years. It's really just extending what the identity security ecosystem can do, but we actually developed a non-employee risk management platform. One of the challenges, I don't like building slides, sorry. But one of the challenges is having that repository for non-employees that is separate from employees. And when we think about the mission partner environment, we may need to separate Coke and Pepsi from seeing each other, knowing about each other, but we're all part of the same mission. So being able to isolate those identities from, let's say, the DoD, the main employee contractor databases, services repository, having them separate, having them follow specific workflows for non-employees, for those third party or supply chain is key. And what this does is it's gonna help us answer the same questions that we answer about employees. Who are they? What can they do? Why are they here? But keeping them separate. And this is going to apply across the rest of our governance controls. So as we build out the model, all the capabilities that an identity security platform provides, access requests, visibility, reporting, workflows, automation, roles, dynamic entitlements, the access certification, all those things apply to those that you would do it on an employee, you're going to do now for your third party. So, as I said, it's its own identity repository. We're going to be able to make smarter decisions about the non-employee. Some of the frustration is onboarding these third parties and offboarding. I mean, as a contractor, it can sometimes take weeks, months to actually get your full access. We should be treating them as an employee in that same onboarding process. Like I said, we don't have a repository for them in most cases. So we're going to pivot a little and talk about some highlights of the platform as they apply to machine identities. We're able to discover identities, and that's key, right? When you look at the numbers here, it's an explosion that is completely unnoticed. Service accounts are there's usually more service accounts than employees. Like I said, they're unmanaged. So one of the things that we've done in our platform, if you are one of our SaaS customers, you came in as an administrator one day, and that was on your dashboard, and that's key. When you log in and you're the identity administrator, and all of a sudden you're told you have 10,000 machine identities that are really unmanaged in your organization, that's huge. We had a lot of customers pivot really quick on this and say, we should probably look into this and go see what we can do about them. So again, very similar capabilities to the identity security ecosystem for employees, but extending that to the service account, to the RPA, to the bot. And the outcomes become the same. That ownership assignment is key, especially when we talk about privileged accounts, machine accounts, RPAs, bots. How do you track that back? Forensically, if something happens with that account and you need to walk it back to where it originated, usually you don't know who owns it. Since we're short on time, we won't get too into the zero trust principles. I think here, most people sitting here probably understand zero trust and the identity pillar, but there's a lot of challenges around visibility. Like I said, that continuous verification, continuous compliance, least privilege, just-in-time access, all apply to these accounts as well. And for the DoD, I think it's key, whether we're talking about the cybersecurity posture, the operational efficiency gains across all missions. So this could be something in Comply to Connect, all the way across to zero trust, SASE objectives for microsegmentation and things like that. But really, we're talking about just enforcing the correct controls around these different types of identities. Failure to govern them is not an option. It undermines our mission readiness, our national security, and organizational resilience. Inaction is not a neutral choice. It's a strategic liability for us, and we have to address it. With that, that was the 20-minute view of machine identity and non-humans and third parties. Thank you very much for attending, and we can ask and answer questions all we want. Oh, no, it's perfect. Thank you.
Frank, thank you so much, and thank you all for being here. Our next session will be at 10:20 on modernized AI and data-centric security. Thank you.